My name is Cindy. I am 47 years old and I work from home. I was relieved this year when my son, Greg, graduated from university and secured a job at a major company. After Greg moved out to start his own life, my mother-in-law suddenly called me into the living room. She said, "Cindy, your role here is finished. You should leave too. We don't need a burden like you in our house." Confused, I asked, "What do you mean?" She coldly replied, "You were only here to take care of Greg. Now that he's become independent, we don't want to live with a person of such low status anymore. Pack your things quickly and get out." She then returned to her room. Unable to comprehend her words, I contacted my husband, Robert. He calmly said, "So my mother told you, right? Actually, we had planned to have you leave once Greg was able to live on his own. I'm sorry, but this is the end of the line. Thank you for everything." And then he hung up. Distraught, I went from the top floor of our house down to the store that Robert managed on the first floor, and I confronted him. "What are you going on about? This is no joke." My voice echoed angrily through the store. Though there were no customers, the staff looked at me in shock. Robert came from the back and hurriedly took me to the back room, saying, "What are you doing? Stop this disgraceful behavior." He always liked flashy things and hated ordinary life, just like his parents. Trying to calm me, he said, "Cindy, you and I belong to different worlds. I thought you understood. Now that Greg is gone, we don't need you anymore. It's better for you to leave. Our lives are fundamentally different." I replied, "You may come from an upper-class background, but how can you treat your wife as disposable just because your child is now independent? That's not right as a human being." Our marriage was what you'd call a shotgun wedding. When we announced our marriage to Robert's parents, knowing I came from a meager background, they sighed and said, "Well, it can't be helped." They agreed to the marriage on the condition that I live with them. I moved in with them, feeling anxious, but afraid of being abandoned while pregnant. Their penthouse apartment had many rooms and a beautiful view from the balcony. When I said, "What a lovely view," my mother-in-law replied discontentedly, "We used to live in a high-rise condo before this." "That's nice. The view must have been lovely there too." "Yes, but now it's overrun with nouveau rich celebrities," she said, expressing her dissatisfaction. Based on her words, I got the feeling that they moved to a new place due to the change in their previous neighbors. However, I later learned that it was actually due to massive loans that they had left unpaid. Robert and his family have a tendency to deceive others, skillfully hiding their own failures. Robert, proud of being raised in a high-rise condo, would say, "I'm going to get an even more luxurious high-rise condo," something beyond the reach of ordinary people. Pleasing his parents with such talk. What surprised me living with them was their complete lack of interest in typical entertainment activities. Concerts, games, and comics were all out of the question. Their enjoyment was reserved for highbrow arts like opera, orchestra, and Broadway. "That's something commoners do," they would say, and even forbade their grandson, Greg, from playing games, giving him expensive toys and encyclopedias instead. When I tried to give him common snacks, they scolded me saying, "You shouldn't let him eat such things." As for their livelihood, they mainly relied on managing the wealth inherited from relatives, not really running any business themselves. This wealth was gradually shrinking due to the economic slump, and when Robert and I got married, their expenses had already exceeded their income, resulting in continuous debt. Robert did manage a shop, but it was a self-indulgent store that catered to his tastes, with very little actual revenue. When I started living with my mother-in-law and took over the household finances, I realized the difficult situation I had found myself in. My mother-in-law had no understanding of managing money. I even heard complaints from hired financial experts to the extent of, no matter how much we explain things to her, she just doesn't understand. She grew up in a wealthy family and married into this household without knowing the real world. The concept of running out of money was alien to her. Robert and his father shared this mindset, believing that money was always plentiful. Whenever I cautioned Robert, he would reply casually, "It's fine, we'll manage somehow." I work as a freelancer from home, and fortunately, I was able to continue this work even after giving birth. Due to their lack of common sense, ensuring the healthy development of my son, Greg, fell solely on me. The result was that my husband's family's finances became dependent on my income, a situation that has continued since we started living together. I had a strong desire to perfectly manage the household chores for the sake of my son, Greg, and despite my busy work schedule, I always made sure to complete them. Even if it meant working through the night, it was due to this that they were unaware that I was really working. His parents were under the misconception that Robert was financially comfortable, while he believed his parents were supporting the household. Thus, my mother-in-law left all the housework to me and indulged in a luxurious lifestyle, spending her days at the theater or shopping and enjoying dinner shows at night. Seeing me working at the house without makeup, she would sarcastically comment, "Shouldn't you pay a little more attention to your appearance?" It's unbelievable for a woman. When Robert's affair came to light a few years ago, she blatantly defended him, saying, "With a wife like that, no wonder he had an affair." Robert, feeling validated by his mother's support, arrogantly agreed, "Right?" and never apologized to me. My deep love for my son was the reason I endured this harsh treatment. As someone who grew up in an orphanage, I yearned to provide him with a warm home with parents, something I had always dreamed of as a child. I never imagined that my husband and mother-in-law had planned to kick me out once my son became an adult. With Greg becoming independent, however, I partially fulfilled my wish to give him a family of his own. I was initially shaken by the sudden demand from my mother-in-law and husband to leave, but then I realized that there was no point in living with those who looked down on me, treating me like a servant. If life lasts 100 years, then at only 47, I'm not even at the midpoint yet. The thought of living a joyful life for myself excites me. I will no longer need to care for my in-laws or Robert. Regaining my composure, I confronted Robert, replying, "Yes, indeed, our social classes are different." He seemed satisfied and arrogantly said, "That's right. By the way, I won't pay any alimony. Be grateful for the trouble I've taken to care for you up to now." I didn't want to be involved with them any further, and I doubted they could afford to pay me some kind of compensation. In reality, they would be at a loss without me. The thought of their foolish faces when they realized the truth made me laugh, and I found the idea of seeking compensation as trivial, responding with an understood. Robert, as if finishing a job, readjusted his stylish hat and said with pretense, "Well then, make sure to pack your things." Robert and I successfully completed our divorce proceedings, and I moved into a new house that was conveniently close to my workplace. As I showed my appreciation and said, "Thank you for everything," my in-laws looked at me with relief, muttering, "To think we were deceived by such a woman." And well, it's easy to be thoughtless when you're young. They maintained their air of superiority until the end, looking down on me. 2 months into my new life, I received a phone call from my former mother-in-law. It was exactly the scenario I had expected. When I answered the phone, my arrogant former mother-in-law asked, "How are you doing, Cindy? Have you gotten used to living on the streets?" To which I confidently replied, "Yes, thanks to you. The high-rise condo is wonderful." "What? Didn't you hear me? Or are you going deaf? It's the high-rise condo, the high-rise condo. The high-rise condo, you say? Stop joking. Is that the name of the building or something? No, it's the well-known high-rise condo that you're aware of." I made it clear to her. She still didn't understand and grumbled, "How did the security of these modern high-rise condos get so lax to let someone like you in?" "No, I'm living here properly. By the way, what floor were you living on when you used to be in the high-rise condo? Why would you ask such a question?" She replied, surprised, "Just curious. Were you around the 15th floor? Don't be ridiculous. Our condo was on the 24th floor. "Oh, I see. So that's exactly half the height of the floor I'm living on now." "What, you're living on the 48th floor?" she exclaimed in shock. "Yes, I'm living freely now that I have no one that I have to look after," I answered. Wait a minute. You didn't. Our wealth? What are you talking about? When you kicked me out, you didn't pay me a dime. Besides, you didn't have enough wealth to buy a high-rise condo. I retorted. Hearing the truth, my former mother-in-law was left speechless and fell silent. Soon after, I heard Robert's voice saying, "Hand it to me, Mom." When he took over the phone, he asked in a trembling voice, "What's this about? What do you mean you're the owner of this building?" It seemed they had just found out this fact and were in a rush to contact me. I could hear my former mother-in-law shouting in the background, "This can't be true." In reality, the building where Robert's store and the top-floor residence were located had been my property for the past 15 years. Previously, they paid rent for the apartment and the store, but as their wealth continued to dwindle, I, looking for investment opportunities, had purchased this building with the future in mind. Until now, the rent and store fees were almost free, but now that we were divorced and essentially strangers, I decided to charge them as tenants. Over the phone, Robert exclaimed, "$10,000 for the store and $3,000 for rent? I can't pay that right now." "No, that's the market price. What we had before was an exception." I responded. Robert, as well as my former in-laws, lacked real work experience and had been living off their family fortune, so they were ignorant about asset management and real estate. Still, you are Greg's father and grandparents. That's why I had been patient until now, I said, returning their own words back to them. I could hear Robert's heavy breathing when suddenly, my former father-in-law took the phone and shouted, "Wait a minute. Don't get ahead of yourself. How did you get so much money? It's impossible for someone to earn that much." That's when I revealed to them, "Actually, I've been hiding this, but I'm a game designer." "What? You never liked games, so I couldn't talk about it before. But actually, I'm quite well known in this industry, and I have patents, so I'm not struggling for income." The truth is, I loved games and started making my own in high school as part of the computer club because I couldn't afford to buy any software. It turned out I had a talent for it, and before getting married, I had created a popular game that became a well-known title. However, Robert, who was unfamiliar with the gaming industry, didn't know anything about this. Games. You might not know this, but the gaming industry is rapidly growing and now stands as one of America's biggest consumer content. My former father-in-law raised his voice in dissatisfaction, even saying that, "It can't be that much. You must have done something illegal." "Robert, we were almost tied to a criminal," he exclaimed in outrage. Frustrated by such accusations, I retorted, "Actually, my annual income is $3 million. I can send you the tax documents if needed." It seemed Robert and my former mother-in-law heard this, as I heard astonished voices through the phone saying, "What? $3 million? That can't be true." My former father-in-law, clearly upset, said, "Well, it seems like a thriving industry. Ordinary people's money can add up, huh?" To which I replied with a smile, "Yes, we cater to the global market, providing the best entertainment to people all over the world." In the background, I could hear Robert and my former mother-in-law arguing. "Robert, how could you not know this?" "Well, she never said anything." "Dad, hand me the phone." As my former father-in-law passed the phone, I could hear him arguing with my former mother-in-law. "Who kicked her out? It was you, wasn't it? Why did you do that? Are you saying it's my fault? You looked down on her too, didn't you?" Then Robert, after coughing, brazenly suggested, "Hey Cindy, let's start over. I can't think of anyone but you." I immediately replied, "There's no way that's happening," and hung up the phone. Afterward, I received numerous calls from my former in-laws, but I ignored all of them. I saved screenshots of the call history as evidence of their harassing behavior. Apparently, they had figured out where I lived and were waiting outside my high-rise condo. In the cold, as soon as they saw me, they approached me with flattery. "Cindy, long time no see. You've become even more beautiful," said my former mother-in-law, while my former father-in-law added, "I apologize for my inappropriate behavior last time." Feeling uncomfortable, I said, "Indeed. Well, I'm in a hurry and was about to head into the mansion when they said, "Wait, Cindy. There seems to have been some misunderstandings, but we need you. We've been thinking about things deeply. And so, thinking of Greg, could we possibly get you to start over with Robert?" They said, feigning repentance. "Didn't you hear? Greg has decided to take my surname. He doesn't want to be associated with your family line." "What, really?" they exclaimed in shock. "For Greg to feel that way about us?" My in-laws said sadly. "A child can't feel good about grandparents and a father who disrespect the child's mother." I said, trying to suppress my laughter. "Greg knew about my job and has now joined a famous gaming company. Robert and my former in-laws had heard about where Greg works, but they weren't familiar with the gaming industry and thought it was just some foreign company. Since he was young, Greg had been forbidden to play games, but he secretly enjoyed playing them in my room and became deeply engrossed. Dejected to having lost their heir, the concierge of the high-rise condo noticed and approached my former in-laws, asking with suspicion, "Is there a problem here?" They left in a fluster. To avoid any further harassment, I had a lawyer compile a report with the call records and recent visits. I sent this to them with a warning letter stating, "I will report any further stalking to the police." Caring deeply about their public image, they chose not to show up again. According to real estate agents, they tried selling their furniture and other expensive items, but ultimately couldn't afford their rent. As a result, they had to move into a small one-room apartment without a bath, and that's with a waived security deposit and no required key money. I heard rumors that they are now living quietly, a stark contrast to their former arrogance. I felt relieved that they were fortunate enough to avoid ending up homeless. Now, I'm preparing for a meeting with Greg, who works at a major gaming company, to develop a new game for overseas markets. As we can talk about games endlessly once we start, we are considering living together in the high-rise condo. When I think of spending my days in this wonderful high-rise condo with its breathtaking views and passionately discussing games with my beloved son, I couldn't be happier. My name is Suzanne. I'm 45 years old. My husband is the same age as me, and we live together with his mother. I have a feeling my mother-in-law will have something to say, so I better get dinner started. Time sure flew by. Before I knew it, it was past 5 p.m. I took a short break and headed to the kitchen on the first floor. It seemed my mother-in-law hadn't come home yet. I took a moment to relax and started to think about the dinner menu. I work from home as a fashion designer, so this house also serves as my workplace. The living and dining areas are on the first floor, and the second floor houses our bedroom and my workspace. I'm home. Today was exhausting. Upon seeing me, my mother-in-law let out an exaggerated sigh. What followed were her usual remarks. "Huh, you're just starting dinner? Isn't it a bit late? I came home tired, and my son will be home soon, you know?" My mother-in-law tended to nitpick about small things. "Sorry, mother-in-law. While she is enjoying her retirement, I'm still working." I wish she'd understand that sometimes. Nonetheless, I tried to change the topic by asking, "Mother-in-law, where did you go today?" I met up with some neighbors. Apparently, they're going to attend an event at the senior citizens' home. But honestly, chatting with other elderly folks can be tiring. "I see. That must have been a bit tough," I replied to her with a smile. I was saying to myself inwardly, "You're an elderly yourself, aren't you? If you'd like to do something nice, maybe you can get me something sweet. How about getting a bun from the next door shop?" My mother-in-law always prioritized her own feelings. She often tried to get me to do things her way. It was tiring, but I always thought of ways to handle it. If she made a fuss, I might just give her the old cake from the fridge. I spent my days with her like this. "Suzanne, is this all for today's menu?" she asked with a slightly surprised look. Before her were pot roast with braised vegetables, home-style chicken noodle soup, and leftover fried chicken with pickles. Well, I was a bit busy today, so I made something quick. Even if you're busy with work, you shouldn't neglect your duties as a wife. Next to me, my husband said, "Yeah? but this looks good enough to me. He said that happily and began to eat my cooking. There was a subtle tension at the dinner table. When I was a newlywed, I was always on edge, but I lived each day to the fullest. I'd get up early, stay up late, cook, sew, arrange flowers. I cherished each of these hobbies. As she reminisced, I was reminded of her era. Indeed, her sewing skills and her hobbies, like flower arrangements, were truly impressive. People around often said Suzanne's mother-in-law is really graceful, but they didn't know how demanding she could be at home. I've lived with her for over 20 years. When we first started our married life, my husband and I enjoyed our time together. But one day, my mother-in-law suddenly came to live with us. Her marriage wasn't going well, and she had a fallout with my father-in-law. He had a stern demeanor, and she seemed scared of him. According to my husband, his father was sometimes very hard on her and, sadly, even raised his hand against her. While he was doted on as their son, his mother was treated poorly. Then, when my father-in-law suddenly declared he was remarrying, she had to leave with nothing. Nearing 50, she seemed lost with nowhere to go. My husband and I decided to take in my mother-in-law because we were concerned about her. 20 years have passed since then, and I began to notice changes in my mother-in-law's personality. She started directing the same behavior she had once received from my father-in-law towards us. One day, when I was busy with household chores and couldn't make tea, I asked my husband to do it for me. He kindly obliged, but my mother-in-law shot me a look and asked, "What are you doing?" "I'm sorry, my hands are full right now." "So what? You only contribute $500 in rent every month. What are you thinking?" She blurted out. Watching her make the tea herself, I thought, if you could do it yourself, you should have done it from the start. Living together like this made me realize how challenging it truly was. One day, my mother-in-law came home looking rather excited. She walked around the house with a spring in her step, humming a cheerful tune. "Mother-in-law, you seem to be in a good mood. Did something good happen? Speaking of which, Suzanne, which room do you think is bigger, the one on the first or second floor?" Her question caught me off guard. "The room on the second floor has more space. If you remove the walls, you can utilize even more of it." "Really? Then I shouldn't have any space issues." Wondering what she was up to, I asked her for more details. "Are you planning on starting something new?" "Actually, I'm going to start a sewing class," she said with a proud and happy expression. "A sewing class? As a teacher?" I was genuinely surprised. The sewing circle at the community center is ending, and a friend suggested we start a new class together. It was surprising that my nearly 70-year-old mother-in-law would be teaching. "That's amazing. Sounds like fun." I responded with a bit of an exaggerated reaction. "So, you're having the sewing class at the community center?" "No, not there," she said with a smile. "Then, where will you hold it?" "Here, at this house." "What? Are you serious?" I blurted out in disbelief. "That's why the second floor room seems perfect. Please tidy it up a bit. I'll have students coming over soon, so let's keep it neat. But that's where I do a lot of my work." I replied with a concerned look. "Your job, right? You can use the first floor's room." I was taken aback. "But that room is a bit small, and I need the flooring for my tools." She seemed to ponder a bit but eventually smiled. "I'll reconsider, but I really like that room." Struggling for words, I asked, "So, what should I do then?" She took my hand and said, "Maybe you can rent an external studio for your work. I'll look into it." And with that, she headed upstairs. I watched as she began to carefully put away my tools and materials. Taking a deep breath, I mustered some courage. "In that case, could I reduce the monthly rent I've been paying?" She smiled warmly. "Let's suggest it. But remember, we need to cooperate and support each other from now on." I reluctantly replied, "Understood." Then, the day of the sewing class my mother-in-law had planned arrived. The room was filled with lively voices. There were about 10 students, mostly my age, and I recognized a few faces. "Suzanne, can you help me out? Please serve tea to everyone." I nodded and headed upstairs after making the tea. After distributing the tea, I remembered something and said with a smile, "Now, about the room's usage fee." A momentary silence followed. "Usage fee? What's that about? Wait, we need to pay today?" Some of the students looked at me with surprised faces. My mother-in-law seemed to be hiding a hint of anger. "Actually, this room is my workspace. So, if you want to use it, I'd like to charge a bit." Renting a space this size can be quite costly. My mother-in-law silently observed the reactions of the students. "It amounts to over $2,000 a month, so if we split it among everyone here today, it's about $100 per person. Is that something everyone can agree with?" I waited for a response with a smile. "Suzanne, you can't be serious about this, can't you?" There was confusion on my mother-in-law's face. "Yes, we will actually need to collect usage fees, but not from the participants today. We will also need to cover utilities and property taxes." As I continued in a gentle tone, my mother-in-law's expression softened. "All right, I understand. But Suzanne, the utilities and such. I need some time to think about that." "Well, if you use this room, it's only fair," I responded with a smile. The students, who had been listening to our conversation, began to murmur. "Wait, was this originally Suzanne's room?" "Yes, it was initially my workspace. Knowing that, I might have to reconsider taking classes here." While some students looked worried, a few started to pack up to leave. "What's the meaning of this? Inviting us and then doing this?" One of my mother-in-law's friends, Michelle, raised her voice in frustration. "Michelle, I'm sorry. This room is also Suzanne's workspace." My mother-in-law, looking frantic, called out to the departing students, "Wait, please." But the sound of doors closing could be heard one after another. Michelle looked at my mother-in-law with a puzzled face. "Everyone, I apologize for the surprise, but this room is really important to me. I want everyone to have a good time here, so I just ask for a bit of understanding." I tried to ease the tension, but Michelle said, "Next time, make sure to discuss this in advance," and with a bitter smile, she patted my mother-in-law's shoulder and left. My mother-in-law stood there for a while. I finished my tea, left the room quietly, and decided to enjoy the outdoor air. Later, at a cozy cafe bathed in soft light, I was having a good time. In front of me were Michelle and the students involved in the earlier incident. "Michelle, thank you for the other day." As I expressed my heartfelt gratitude, Michelle smiled warmly. "It's okay, Suzanne, but I was shocked that your mother-in-law would pull such a stunt," she said with a chuckle. "I didn't expect things to turn out this way, but now I'm really enjoying it." A student sitting next to me said shyly, "That day's events were actually a plan we had secretly hatched. The truth is, Michelle is the mother-in-law of my friend and we've always been close. She always sees right through me when I'm in trouble. That's why, with Michelle's help, we decided to execute a certain plan." One of the students, who was the only one unaware of the situation, exclaimed, "Wait, all that was planned?" I said with hopeful anticipation. "Well, I might have spiced things up a bit, but hopefully this will get my mother-in-law to be more considerate." "Suzanne, you've really surprised me by coming up with something this entertaining," Michelle said with a bright smile. The atmosphere in the cafe was warm and friendly. Michelle was quite interested in my future plans. "So, Michelle, what are you planning to do about the sewing class?" "For now, I'm planning to hold it at a different location." "I see. I can introduce you to a place I know. They're very reliable." "That's so kind of you, Suzanne. You're always so dependable." Michelle's words filled my heart with joy. After this incident, I felt our bond has deepened even more. As I sipped my fragrant tea, confident in this. When I got home, I noticed my mother-in-law seemed a bit different. "Suzanne, this is unbelievable. You embarrassed me in front of so many people. You need to apologize to everyone right now." Her eyes were furious. Taking a deep breath, I slowly took out my phone. "Sorry, I'm on the phone right now," I said, showing her the name Michelle on the screen. Her astonished face was unforgettable. "Huh? Why are you talking to Michelle?" When my surprised mother-in-law reached for my phone, my husband's voice came from the speaker. Hey, Mom, what's this about Michelle? She was speechless, her eyes wide with shock. Yes, I had cheekily changed my husband's contact name to Michelle just for fun. Seeing her confused expression, I couldn't help but smile. Don't worry, it's just a little joke, I said, heading to the kitchen. After that day, my mother-in-law's attitude completely changed. She became gentler and seemed to be more cautious around me. During meals, she seemed wary, as if wondering what I might be up to next. My husband noticed the change, commenting, "Mom, you seem a bit off. Is everything okay?" I wonder why," she responded. "It might just be because she's getting older," my husband added, looking deep in thought. From then on, our home became more peaceful. I started to relax more in my daily life. Who would have thought that a simple prank could change the atmosphere at home so much? I cherish each day, enjoying each and every moment.